Hello everyone, if you're watching this then I guess there's a few things I need to say. One, I'm about to go on a plane, so relatively soon. So this is one of those classic, by the time you watch this I will have completely done the whole trip and hopefully everything was okay, because haha, that's what I worry about. But that aside, because, whatever, my mind's elsewhere, I thought I'd do something reasonably easy. And speaking of this being reasonably easy, if you are watching this then that probably means that I am doing something complicated to do with the fact that I should be moving into a house soon. Now, I don't know exactly what it is in the moving into a house process that is going to be complicated. It could be that I'm waiting for Wi-Fi to, be a thing. So, I'm waiting for that, or sorting out some of the furniture. Basically, I'm just imagining that because I'm moving house, there will be a 2-week period where I'm going to really wish that I had something very easy to do in order to entertain people and something that I think would interest a lot of people. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm going through the entire political compass test. I am working on the assumption that this will be a 2-part video. I would be very surprised if it wasn't, so I'm not going to hold back on elaborating about my various positions on these issues. Also, of course, this will not be scripted. It will be, I guess, maybe therefore a bit more rambly. I will try to edit it as much as possible. I don't know how long this is going to be in terms of recording. I've set aside 5, let's assume this could take up to 5 hours of just sat there talking if it's going to be, a 2-part video. And to be honest, it then occurred to me after the fact, well, actually, it better not be, because I don't think I have enough space on my, various memory cards to actually do that. So we'll see. I guess we will jump in, right? Because if it is going to take a while, then it makes sense to jump in. And I don't really have anything else to say, so I hope you enjoy. Yeah, I just, my impression is that this is something that would interest a lot of people. A lot of people wonder about my wider politics, and I'm probably going to have some spicy takes, so I think everyone will enjoy this. Now, admittedly, we start off, so I believe these are different sections. I could be wrong about that, but I think the first section is maybe about economics, but, whatever. So, starting off with a pretty easy one, I think. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. This is one of those ones, it's almost so easy that I can't imagine anyone would actually disagree with this, because surely even if you're someone who's very pro-capitalist, you think that in the final sense, the ultimate benefit of having transnational corporations is that they generate wealth, which leads to economic prosperity, which makes things better for everyone. So I genuinely can't understand how anyone would say, oh, actually no, I disagree, screw humanity, I prefer transnational corporations. Having said that, I guess, do I agree with this more than a typical person would? I suppose the answer is, well, I do think we should have limits. So, for example, something you could apply this to is the environment. Do I think that we should have limits on environment, or what companies can do as it could impact the environment? And the answer would be yes. So based on the fact that I assume everyone surely agrees with this a bit, I genuinely, I can't even factor in the disagree options, because I just can't imagine who would. Maybe some people say mildly disagree, because they would say, well, I'm slightly more on the side of pro-corporation, and, blow the environment and all that kind of stuff. But based on the fact I'm assuming so many people must be average, I'm going to say strongly agree, because I think it's so obvious, and I think that I'm probably more the kind of person to say, well, actually, we need to limit the actions of transnational corporations for the benefit of humanity. Right. I'd always support my country, whether it was right or wrong. So this is a very interesting, philosophical question, because obviously it kind of gets at, what does it mean to support something? What does it mean to, I suppose the other question would be, what does it mean for something to be that thing? Because you could say, for example, that, people might say, oh, well, America isn't even America anymore. So they'd be like, well, I support America, but it's the true America, not this current thing we have, which is a fake America. I feel like that's naturally, especially, well, I'm just going to move this because I feel like I shouldn't have my face quite covered by my microphone. Yeah, I think that's naturally, especially American liberals might have, where they would say, well, America's the greatest country on earth. And they were able to say that while simultaneously thinking that America is a deeply evil country, because what they would say is, well, the current regime, that's not really America. So I think that's one attitude here. But the other question is, how can you support something while simultaneously acknowledging that it is wrong, right? Saying, well, I recognise what this country's doing is wrong, but I support it. It's a difficult one for me because it's kind of, I always like the United Kingdom. I would say that I am pro the UK, even though the UK's done and is currently doing evil things. I mean, obviously Iraq was the big evil thing that sticks out in my mind, but of course then there's what's going on in Gaza and the UK's complicity in that. I think the UK has a lot of making up to do to the world, but I always think the UK's done a lot of great things. It's a tough, because in some sense, like, well, I do still like the UK, I still want the UK to be doing well, but I think I'm going to say mildly disagree. I could say strongly disagree, but I think there are some people who they have literally no, if you like, kind of tribalistic affinity for the country they're at, and they would literally say, the country I'm in means nothing to me beyond as a means to achieve certain political ends. So, if I thought that my country was going against what I want politically, I would literally just have, like, I would just abandon it. Like, they would mean nothing to me. Whereas my attitude is, even when my country is being wrong, I still want it to come back to being good. And I still have those aspirations. So I'll say, yeah, that's why I'm saying mildly disagree. But I would still say that actually, I can't in good conscience say that I support the UK when it's doing evil things. But even then, it's kind of, you can see how it's a bit weird with, like, what does it mean to support something? Because, well, I still want the UK to be doing well. I just want it to also stop doing those evil things. But I'm imagining that this is talking about the kinds of people who would literally, like, support the United States during Vietnam, support the UK during Iraq. Like, basically people who would be waving the flag for their country while their country's literally doing something objectively evil on the world stage. And obviously I don't agree with that. No one chooses their country of birth, so it's a foolish thing to be proud of. I've recently had an insight about this, which is that I think that, well, there's two issues here. One is that you can be proud of your country and it not even be the country in which you were born. So I suppose in that sense, I would say I kind of agree, in that I would say that it's sort of foolish for me to say I'm proud of having been born in this country when there are other people who maybe they were raised in other countries, maybe other countries that are part of the Commonwealth, who have attained citizenship and sought that out because they love the UK. Like and you know, it doesn't matter why. Maybe they came to the UK on holiday. They fell in love with the country. They said, this is, you know, such a wonderful country. And then they get their citizenship and they're super proud of having their citizenship. And if I were to say, well, I'm proud of having been born in this country, as opposed to that person who actively chose to be part of this country and chose to seek out becoming a citizen, and they're proud of the country, do I think there is some way in which me having been born in this country is more legitimate? No. So in that sense, it doesn't really make sense to be proud of having been born in the country. I think it makes sense to be proud of your country, because that is something which you could say, well, actually, even if I had been born in a different country, I might have still come to the UK, as many people have, and come to consider the UK my home, as many people do. So being proud of your country is not something arbitrary. There are people who feel proud about countries that they essentially adopt as their own nationality. So in that sense, I would say it is a foolish thing to be proud of. But the other thing here is that this idea that it doesn't make sense to be proud of something that you don't choose, I actually disagree with, because what I've recently decided is that when we talk about pride, I think the best way to understand it, or at least the way that makes the most sense in terms of maximizing the possibility for rationally being proud of things, is that you're proud of something when you are happy to be associated with it. So the example would be like city pride. The fact, if you think as a Londoner, oh, I love the vibe of London, I love the attitude of your typical Londoner, I love the perception that people have of London, and I'm really happy that I'm associated with that. That, I would say, is pride. So, you know, having a sense of, I'm aware there are a lot of people who have a positive image of the UK. I remember seeing something recently which was about a Japanese person who was kind of doing a lot of British things, like they were having tea and crumpets and stuff like that, or I believe scones. And somebody said, oh, you know, seeing this, it makes me feel like there is this idealized view of England that certain cultures have that we're not living up to. And I'm kind of ashamed of that. I'm ashamed that actually when people come to the UK, there are a lot of places you can't show. And the flip side to that actually is I went to London, and yes, I went to the centre, but I was honestly delighted to discover that it was actually as idyllic as I think anyone could reasonably expect it to be. There weren't any homeless people. There weren't any like vagrants and apparent drug addicts. Literally the worst thing that happened is we walked past a builder's site and I heard one builder swear at the other. But apart from that, if I was like a Japanese person coming to the UK or Chinese, whatever, I'm kind of imagining a lot of East Asians have this very kind of romantic view of Europe. If I was coming to the UK, then I would actually be quite pleasantly, well, not even surprised, right? I would be like, oh, this is what I wanted if I came to London. And I had that experience that I had the last time I went to London, where it was kind of, walking around. Oh, look at all the beautiful buildings, nice people. Everyone was like well-dressed, well-mannered, fantastic. I want that. I suppose now I have to put all that together, right? Because what I'm saying is, in some sense, I think it makes sense to be proud of your country. But in another sense, obviously, you shouldn't say, so I think I'm going to say mild disagree. Essentially, that's what I'm building up to, because I think that there is a reason to be proud of your country if you're born in it, and you don't have to be proud of something just because you chose it or just because you actually caused the thing to be proud. I think the logic for why you would be proud of something is if you feel happy about being associated with that thing. And the fact that I am British, and basically what Britain could be and what many people perceive it as is something that I'm happy to be associated with. But at the same time, the reason why I'm not saying I strongly disagree is because I do recognize that actually me saying, well, I'm proud of being born in the UK, as opposed to somebody who was not born in the UK, but maybe still has that affinity and comes to actually, get citizenship. It wouldn't make sense for me to be prouder than that person, because actually that person, if you've come to the UK and you love the UK, or even if you've never been to the UK and you just had a view of like the UK as this dream, which is the case of my grandma, who is Indian, and she lived in India, but she wanted to move to the UK because she thought the UK was just the best country on earth. And, she has citizenship. And I would hope that if you asked her, is she proud to be British? She would say she very much is, even though she wasn't born in this country. My mum, for the record, wasn't born in this country either, but, she's a bit more, I don't think she would, she's not exactly patriotic. Anyway. Okay, so our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. Strongly disagree. I don't really need to elaborate on this. I've said before, my issue with this kind of, obviously it depends how you define race. But if you say like Northwest European, I was going to say Anglican, what is it? Anglo-Saxon, is I think, if you want to be more specific, white people in general, I guess, but then you get into all the blurred edges of that. The issue I always have with it, one, you look at history, Northwest Europeans were viewed as barbarians for much of human history, and I don't think that was inaccurate. Like, the contrast I always make is that you have The Lord of the Rings, where the ancient history of the world is, because of course, if you know, Lord of the Rings is supposed to be a mythologized history of the actual planet, with Middle-earth basically being Europe. The ancient history of the world, as presented in Lord of the Rings, is that there were these like white people who all had these kind of, obviously got the Shire, where it's this really nice, quaint country life, but of course then you had these grand citadels in Gondor and places like that, and they're being attacked by these barbarian hordes who are clearly supposed to be from Asia and Africa. I'm not saying that Tolkien is racist. You can absolutely enjoy the stories, but the point is that is a useful point of contrast to the reality, because in reality it wasn't a whole load of like this white master race with these fantastic citadels and basically having the appearance of being the only civilized people, while these barbarian hordes of various other skin tones were attacking them, and we had to hold them back. No, it's kind of the opposite actually. that there were many more, I suppose olive-skinned, a lot of people from the Mediterranean, people from the Levant and Mesopotamia. Those were the places that had civilization. Those are the places where it started. And they were having barbarians coming down from, lands which would later be Slavic. So kind of, Russia, Northern Europe, basically. So that's the issue, right? And then essentially what you arrive at is the fact that it seems to me like for all these race realists talk about, we're just following the science. Literally all they're doing is just looking at the current state of the world and saying, well, obviously that's just caused by race. Like they're literally just making up an explanation. And yeah, it functions, I guess, an explanation. If you just say, the reason why East Asia seems very like smart and sophisticated and Europe seems, very, I guess, like we'll use the word civilized, whereas places like Africa and Australasia, back before it was settled by white people, these places seem more primitive. You could just look at that and say, well, this is because of genetics. But I think that's dumb because, like I say, you literally are just making up an explanation, and you could say anything else. You could say it's because of what the curse of Ham, right? It was Ham who was cursed, and that was supposed to be why black people are deficient or whatever. Like that was an old explanation. But I think there is a much more credible kind of, and I know this book is a bit too pop history, but guns, germ, and steel explanation. And it just seems very stupid to me, considering the fact that we know that someone would have looked at history. Like, you can't deny this. You're the race realist. You can't deny that if there were aliens who came to Earth in 1 AD, they would look and they would think that Northwest Europeans were the stupidest, most barbarous people on the planet. Because, like, that's basically we were just living in, like, mud huts and stuff. Probably not mud huts, obviously, because they would have melted. But, basically living with not very sophisticated building technology, not very sophisticated governments. We were just, like, raiding and, like, destroying and pillaging a lot of, like, Roman land and things. We were the barbarians. We were not the bastions of civilization. So I just don't see how you can get around that, like, as a race realist, the fact that applying what seems to be your singular methodology, which is just to look at the world and be like, I'm getting some pretty, uncivilized vibes from these people. So I'm going to say that they are genetically predisposed to be stupid. And, these people, they seem to have some nice skyscrapers and good infrastructure and, like they write some good books and stuff. So these people are obviously genetically more intelligent. Applying that exact same methodology, you could conclude that white people were the stupidest, like, race on the planet at other points in history. So that's issue number one. Obviously, you could then, like, get into things like, well, maybe we have, like, physical traits. And, there does seem to be a thing about, like, black people are slightly more predisposed to certain illnesses and stuff like that. But, on balance, surely it's a wash. They're taller and faster than us. They've got some things going for them. So, yeah, I just strongly disagree. I don't even think there's a need for any nuance there. I will say I'm actually recording this. It's my wife's birthday today, which obviously it's not an all-day celebration by any means, but it might mean that, there's stuff going on which draws my attention away. So just forgive me if occasionally it looks like the camera angle and stuff like that has reset and I'm in a slightly different position. It will probably be because I got up to do something. All right. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend. This is, again, a really weird, like, philosophical one, and I feel like there's no way that you can strongly, one way or the other, agree or disagree here. But I will say, instantly I'm drawn towards agree, because I'm someone who's always said, yes, I do endorse alliances of convenience in some context. Obviously, as a gender critical person, something that I always hear, and I was going to say you always hear probably, is, the fascist far right agree with you, and Putin agrees with you, and, like the Taliban maybe agrees with you. Like, basically they'll list off all of these evil groups that agree with you. And this is supposed to make you say, in that case, I'll abandon the position. Obviously that's stupid. No, like, the reality is that there are some positions where, if you feel strongly about it, I respect if you want to work with everyone apart from yourself. Something I got recently was a comment that someone's like, I tell you who's the really stupid people, those queers for Palestine. That's really dumb, isn't it? Because you know that Hamas would kill all the gay people. And it's like, I respect that. At the end of the day, look, if you are someone who is gay and you don't like the fact that Hamas is gonna kill you, throw you off a building, stone you, whatever, but you hate Israel even more, and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna work with Hamas just because I hate Israel that much. Honestly, I respect it. And it's kind of this, like, whatever it is, right? If you, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like another example of like a big hot button issue. But essentially, yeah, if your position is genuinely, like, you have a position you really strongly hold to, and you're willing to work with people who even want you dead based on that, I totally respect that. The one thing you'll never hear me make fun of is Queers for Palestine. If you are a gay guy and you just think what Israel's doing is totally, like, evil, and you're like, you know what? I don't care. Anyone's fighting against it, I'm allying with them. I'm going to call myself an ally. Yeah, I'm a queer for Palestine, queer for Hamas, queer for Hamas, even including the part where they throw all the gay people off of roofs and, you know, like, torture them or whatever, because, you know, Hamas, they're going to viva la resistance. They're going to liberate liberate Palestine, whatever. Cool, awesome. That's fine. And of course, yeah, applying that to the trans critical issue as well. If you're someone who's just like, yeah, I don't even care that, like, Donald Trump is going to take away a lot of women's rights, if he is, then because you're just like, I hate the trans thing, you know what, I can respect that. Again, this isn't necessarily saying I agree with such a position, but I can respect the conviction involved in alliances of convenience, because that's what, like, that's basically the necessity, right? When you have an alliance of convenience, you are expressing a strong commitment to a specific position. And I like that. Now, having said that, the one thing that's drawing me back away from this, though, is I'm a very sectarian person. A good example here is my religion channel. I don't think my religion channel is ever going to become massively popular. And the reason for that is because I'm not in it to make allies. I'm not in it to have alliances of convenience on that issue. I'm coming after the Catholics. I'm coming after the Muslims. I'm coming after the Jews. I'm coming after the atheists. If I ever, like, really kind of educate myself enough on this issue, I feel I'm able to, I'll come after the Hindus if in educating myself I don't become convinced they're actually the correct position. Oh, and to say nothing of, like, the Mormons, the Restorationists, things like that. So, you know, everyone can catch this smoke, catch this heat, whatever people say, because there are some issues where it's like, no, there is a truth, there is a correct position, and every other position, you've got to stand against it. And honestly, when, like, some LARPing tradcon Catholic comes up to me like, hey bro, I saw your video criticizing Islam and it's so cool, and I've been praying to my idol, my statue of Mary, all day, praying that she would help us to do another Reconquista, and we could do a crusade and we could take the Holy Land back from the Muslims and the Jews. And I'm like, get the hell away from me, you sick, goddess-worshipping pagan freak. I don't want anything to do with you. Go pray to your statue of Mary some other time, or about something else. Because she's not going to help you. I mean, spoiler alert, she's not going to help you at all. She's a piece of wood representing a human woman who can't hear you when you pray to her. But that aside, she's not going to help you with, like, this issue, because there's nothing that's going to make me ally with you and say, like, oh, we're brothers in arms in some religious crusade. What? Because we both disagree with Islam. Oh, wow. Really great. Give yourself a round of applause. You're still wrong. You're still going to hell. Anyway, so that's the point, right? I'm not someone who's always going to be like, oh, really? You agree with me on one thing? Well, let's be best buddies then. Of course, the problem is that, like, ends up in inconsistency, right? Because if I said, oh, you know, I agree with the Catholics on, I don't know, what do I agree with? On the Trinity, right? But then I agree with the Muslims on, like, basically the issue of idolatry. Muslims tend to be very much against creating images of things. So, which side, like, if I'm going to, like, agree with, if I'm going to say, like, everyone's my friend if I agree with them on one point, then I'm not going to have any enemies, right? Because I'm always going to agree with something on someone. So it's arbitrary. Anyway, long story short, agree, is the answer. My tummy rumbled. I apologize. Sorry, I feel like I probably did that the wrong way around, didn't I? Because basically, I started off explaining why I agree and then said why I disagree. And then I ended after having explained why I disagree and then said agree. So essentially, I still feel very strongly about the importance of occasionally doing alliances of convenience. And I'm generally unmoved when people say to me, oh, you know, they're like the bad people on other issues, right? I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, but I'm going to work with them on this issue. However, I'm not going to put strongly agree, because there are some cases where I do feel that actually part of, like, being strong on a position, especially a position I think where it's holistic, like religion. I think if you think that a religion is true, that is your grand theory of everything, essentially. So I don't think you can compromise on that. I don't think you can say, oh, like what, like David Wood and stuff, where it's like you criticize Islam, but then you go to Israel and you like glaze them, like, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, but I'm going to go and worship the people who killed Christ. That doesn't make any sense. So there are some points where you actually have to be consistent and stick to you, like saying, hey, I'm right, everyone else is wrong, and I'm not interested in making friends here. I guess you know, I have a smoothie for breakfast, which is incredibly convenient for, like, basically if I'm if I'm typing a script or something, I can just sit there like sip, sip, like it's a very easy thing to do. The problem is it's not so good for recording videos because it's a bit thick and viscous, and essentially I take a sip and then I'm just like getting a whole lot of mouth sounds. It's not good. Anyway, so next question is, military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. Well, isn't that a shocking thing? This is an interesting one because I guess there's a question of, do you even believe in international law as a thing? I always find it stupid that people talk about illegal invasions, because it's kind of like, at the end of the day, countries invading other countries is such a common thing throughout history, and to just say, oh, that was illegal, it just doesn't really make any sense. I guess like the other issue is, I would feel like surely invading people is almost always illegal. I don't really like buy this idea that there is some arbiter of the globe that is in a position of authority to say that another country has the right to invade another. So essentially, my issue with this idea of like illegal invasions is that, are you implying there's such a thing as a legal invasion? Are you implying that like if everyone gets together and agrees by consent that we should invade this country, therefore that's a legal thing to do? I don't know. I think I would almost prefer to talk about like unilateral versus, I guess, like what, multilateral with this issue. Because, you know, the thing about something like the invasion of Iraq is it was not unilateral, but basically unilateral, in that there were a handful of countries that were like, yeah, this is the thing we should do. But there were a whole load of countries saying, no, this is actually an evil thing to do. You don't have any business. You don't have any right to invade Iraq in this way. And, you know, I don't think that makes it legal or illegal. I think it makes it so actually the fact that like nobody is agreeing with you is a strong indication that you are in the wrong. Not a guaranteed indication, but it's strong. Obviously, the flip side is invading like Germany in the 1940s. Basically, everyone in the world apart from Germany was like, oh yeah, this is probably a good idea. So with that said, I guess there's like two things, like military action. So when it comes to like human rights, things like Abu Ghraib, things like soldiers basically abusing and killing citizens, basically stuff that would be a violation of somebody's rights if they were a citizen of your country. So essentially, if the United States is doing things to Iraqis that we would all recognize is a clear, gross violation of their own citizens' rights if they were doing it to their own citizens, I think that is never justified. We should not be going into other countries and I mean, I guess I maybe say like the rule around like detainment, like obviously in prisoner of war camps, you know, you don't need to give every single, if you like capture a group of people, you can detain them, at something approximating indefinitely without a trial. Whereas of course in the UK, in a non-war situation, you can't do that. So there are some exceptions, but for things like torture, obviously things like, you know, killing people, like summary executions of unarmed combatants, all of that stuff, of course, absolutely never, ever justified. But the invasions themselves, I think one thing I would kind of think about is it depends if other countries are not obeying the international laws. Because if they're not, then I think you can understand why you might say, you're not right. And look, I don't want to wade into the Russia-Ukraine thing too much, but I will say the obvious thing, right? Which is that Russia is aware that Western aligned powers are pushing right up to their border. And they also know that very recently, the United States has been illegally invading other countries, right? So I don't know if it exactly makes sense to say that Russia was totally unjustified in doing an illegal invasion to attack a country that was aligning to the West, considering that the United States and the West more broadly, like the United States and the United Kingdom, had illegally invaded a country not very long before then. Because I feel like then you could say, well, obviously I need to defend myself. I'm not just going to sit back and let this country, which has a history of going against international law, just continue to encroach right up to my border until it's too late and I've got no way of defending myself. And obviously I'm not saying I'm not saying that specific incident was justified. That is a much bigger conversation, but I'm giving that as an example. And if you imagine a more exaggerated example, and you know what, I'll appease the neoliberal Westoid simps here. Let's imagine it was China, and China illegally invaded Mongolia. Then they illegally invaded North Korea, I guess, I don't want to be complaining about that, but whatever. Illegally invaded Vietnam, and illegally invaded Burma. Just illegally invaded a whole load of countries. And then Mexico started saying, oh, you know what, we're really big fans of China. In fact, we want to join a military alliance with China, like basically NATO, but Sino or whatever, and we want to join that. I think you could argue in that context it would be justified for the United States to invade Mexico in contravention of international law, because they're doing that to push back an opponent that has gone against international law themselves, right? So actually, that would be a situation where I think it is justified, where actually you need to, when no one else is playing the game, so you've got to kind of stand up for yourself. I guess, so I'm going to say, I think I'm still going to say, I don't want to say agree though, because I would say generally speaking, I'm really against a lot of wars that have happened. I think a lot of wars that have happened are complete nonsense. Having said that, a lot of the wars that I think are complete nonsense, I don't even know if they go against international law. This is a tough one, because I could go either way for agree or disagree. I could say I agree because sometimes I think it can be justified, or I could say, well, I disagree. I guess I've got to say agree, right? Because by the literal meaning of the statement, I do think it can sometimes be justified. I'm not like always taking these statements completely literally, and the reason why I was thinking I should say disagree is because, generally speaking, if there is a conversation where someone is trying to justify a war, again, for me, the international law thing isn't really relevant though. I would just say whether or not it's just. So I suppose that's it, right? What matters to me more is whether or not it's justified, not whether or not it is in agreement with international law. There's now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. I really want to say no to this because I'm a big fan of edutainment. I think, obviously, maybe this is talking about fake news, the fact that we have news that's designed to appeal to people's emotions rather than people's reasoning capacities. But for me, I think I'm going to say strongly disagree. Because I don't think, while I think there is a problem with misinformation in the world, I don't really think that information is, I wonder what this advert is. Okay, it's not completely, pornographic. That's good. Basically, while I think that there is a lot of misinformation out there, I really don't think it being entertaining is at all the problem. And I think you can, I'm not worried by that. So I'm just going to say strongly disagree because I really don't buy into that at all. And also, I don't just want to be doing the mild agree, disagree. I want to appreciate the fact we have the strongly as a qualifier there, and I want to respond accordingly. Also, now the economy. We're talking attitudes here, not the FTSE index. I'm not gonna lie, I don't actually know what FTSE stand for. Financial Times something everywhere. People are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. This is an interesting one because in the UK, I would definitely say people are divided more by class than ethnicity. I think that a upper class black person is going to get along much better with an upper class white person than a working class people. And I think, obviously, in most multi-ethnic areas, you will have multi-ethnic working class friend groups, multi-ethnic middle class friend groups. And the upper class is a very exclusive club, but multi-ethnic upper class friend groups when that is a possibility. So ethnicity, yes, but nationality, that is a bit difficult there because obviously with nationality, I can't see Americans. I can't see, Azerbaijanis or whatever. There's so many people of different nationalities who I've never interacted with at all in my life. Whereas I have interacted with lots of people from different classes. I think there is this, like, there's that idea that ultimately a working class American, their government is more an enemy to them as a working class Iranian's government is more an enemy to them than the working class Iranian and the working class American are enemies to each other. That basically the top down divisions in our society are much more serious in terms of speaking to a real division than the side to side divisions. But the problem is, in some sense, that's talking about what should be the case. Like, we should be more united, but the issue is that I do feel like, I suppose ultimately, so I guess that is a useful thing to have in there, because I was going to say, I do feel like I could get along better with someone who's a different class than me, but British, than I could with someone who's from a totally different country. Having said that though, if we're talking about ultimately, well, I recognize that actually the way that society is going to come together is by reducing class division, not by reducing the variety of nationalities. So I think I will say, I think I've got to go mild agree. Even though, because I think it would be weird, especially seeing as I am kind of a bit socialistic, Marxist-like in some of my thoughts, it would be a bit weird to disagree with that. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. This is a really weird one. It seems like it must be coming from a very different perspective, because this will be going up. I realize the day I'm recording this actually is the day that my Why I Support High Taxes video is going up. So in that video, I say that we should pursue a policy of deflation. And the reason why is because inflation does basically, I stand by this, it basically functions as a flat tax because it is a way of injecting money into the economy, but it reduces the value, the spending power of everyone's money equally. So if you're reducing the amount of money everyone has equally, that is a flat tax. So in that sense, I'm really against inflation. The problem is, I'm also really against unemployment. Because, so essentially, like, my attitude is, I want the, like, basically working class people, or you could say the workers, the people who are actually putting in the effort to keep this society and this economy ticking over, I want them to be fairly compensated. I want them to get a good shake. And I want that at the cost of the global elite, who are in fact, often acting as parasites, often holding this country back. The issue is, I feel like controlling inflation and controlling unemployment are both important for that, right? Because we need to control unemployment so that people are able to actually find jobs and work hard. And, basically, because I don't think that there aren't many people in this country who are poor because of the fact that they are refusing to do jobs. There are people in this country who are poor because jobs aren't available. So we need to control unemployment to help those people out. But we also need to control inflation. If you were to ask me, like, which one would I rather have? I guess I would rather have a society where everybody is engaged in, good quality employment, basically employment where they get a good wage and stuff like that, because then inflation wouldn't really matter. So I'll say disagree. But again, for me, I'm literally like, this is the closest I've been to that, why can't you have both? You can have both. Like that guy who was like, I can't remember what it was asked, like economic stability or LGBT rights. I'm usually happy to respond to hypotheticals that, because obviously I do think you can have both in this case. However, yeah, that was a tough hypothetical to respond to, because I literally, for me, like, those two things are very intertwined in that they're part of a wider effort to fix the economy. I think fixing the economy involves dealing with both those things at once, in a way. So, yeah, but I'm going to say disagree, like I say, because if I had to choose, if you forced me to choose, then I would say, I could say, in fact, also the other sense in which I could disagree is that I don't think it's more important, right? I think they're equally important. So, yeah. All right. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. Strongly agree. Well, I just highlighted it. Strongly agree. Easy peasy. Yes, the environment matters. And obviously, right? Like, we literally had like sewage being dumped, like raw sewage dumped into the ocean by these companies recently, and obviously that was a disaster, and it rightfully should be, because like that's the thing. This isn't like the thing about the environment is some people act like it's like a one size fits all thing, where it's like, I mean, look, for the record, I think that you're an idiot if you don't believe in anthropogenic climate change, but I can accept that anthropogenic climate change is more speculative. So if you're like, well, I don't really believe in it, so okay, whatever, fine, who cares? But the thing is, like, so many people then act like they're annoyed at things like ultra low emission zones and stuff like that. But that's not even about like that's not about climate change. That's about, should you directly have a car exhaust hooked up to your lungs? That's the question there. And if you're like, well, no, I think maybe we should, you're an idiot. Like, you're a double idiot. So yeah, obviously we should have regulations to make sure that you're not swimming in sewage. Like, that's the question here, right? The question is here, do you want to swim in sewage? Or rather, let me phrase that, because I strongly agree. The question is, would you like to not swim in sewage? If you put strongly disagree, you're saying, oh, actually, no, I'd love to swim in sewage. That's literally it. It's like, there's no option here. If someone asks me, do I want to avoid swimming in human excrement? Yeah, where's the super strongly ultra agree option? Okay. From each according to his ability, to each according to his need, is a fundamentally good idea. Yeah, kind of. Something that I do think is, I think people have like differing levels of capacities, differing levels of interest. There are a lot of people out there, and this is not really what the original like quote is supposed to be about, I guess, but there are a lot of people out there who genuinely don't have any hobbies, and I feel like some of those people, they obviously, because they don't have any hobbies, they work really hard. Like, there are people who genuinely think nothing of, even though they're working a 9 to 5, they show up at 8:30 and they don't leave until 7 p.m. I've known people like that in work environments. And the only conclusion I can reach is, well, that person just doesn't have a life. Or, and maybe that's a bit too mean to say, their work is their life, which is a fine thing. I mean, what I do is something I enjoy. I work incredibly strong hours. The thing is, I'm aware, or incredibly long hours, but I'm just aware a lot of people don't consider what I'm doing to actually be work. So yes, I could say, oh, I work like a 70-hour work week. And everyone would say, no, you don't, because you just make YouTube videos, not realizing like the effort that goes into that. But whatever. The point is that there are some people out there who basically are very content to work. So this idea that everything should be absolutely fair, the issue it runs up against is that actually the person who, like, what they do with their free time is genuinely the most miserable thing in the world. Like, the person who literally just spends their entire free time browsing TikTok. The idea that it's so unfair that they would be expected to work slightly more than somebody who has loads of hobbies, loads of friends, they play sports, they go to the gym, they do yoga, they go to church, like so many other things that they're doing in their life. Like, that does seem kind of dumb to me. And I wouldn't say it's like, but in that context, I would say that's kind of the from each according to their ability thing. Like, if you have the ability to just work a huge amount of time and not feel like you are sucking your soul away because you actually don't have that many interests outside of work, then maybe you should work a little bit more. Maybe you should take one for the team and do something to kind of subsidize those people who have all sorts of hobbies. Me, I'm one of those people who the day could literally not be long enough for me to exhaust all the things I would love to do. And I know there are other people out there who literally, like, anyone who's ever uttered the sentence, I'm bored, as an adult, I'm bored, should be put into a workers' camp immediately, because how can you be bored as an adult when you can literally choose to do anything you want to do in life? But obviously I understand what this is really referring to is like people with disabilities, you know, people who aren't able to work and they need to. So yeah, is it a fundamentally good idea? Yes. The problem is it depends how you define ability and need, right? Because you could say, the ability is like, you have the ability to want to work. And then you could say, well, this person, they have the need for someone else to work for them because they don't want to work. And at that point, you are just endorsing laziness. I think I'll say agree, because I think, you know, as it would logically be applied, which is that, you know, we live in a society where people in general wants to work hard, and it's only the people who absolutely, like, that's the thing. Yeah, it's basically, it all comes down to how you define need. If we're talking about absolutely need to, like, these people need something, This person's like dying of cancer and they don't have any money. They need financial support. They need someone to pay for their healthcare. I think you have to agree with that. Otherwise, again, you're literally saying just, should we let people die? Right, next, the freer the market, the freer the people. So obviously, no, I would say that, people should have the ability to trade things around. Well, I don't know. I mean, the problem is, logically, like you just think about it for a second, you're like, well, you could have a situation where the market gets more free, but people's other freedoms are massively cracked down on. Like if the government says, hey, we're reducing some regulation about, trading this particular thing, but also if you, blink more than 7 times in a minute, then you're going to be executed by firing squad. Well, in that context, pretty obviously the market has got more free, but the people haven't. Now, having said, if we're just looking at this in isolation and saying, well, as the market, like if we're just ignoring, like assuming everything else being equal, as the market gets more free, is there a point where the market gets so free that people become less free? And I guess the answer I would say is yes, in the case of people engaging in certain vices, right? Like the more free that the heroin market gets, the less free people become, because you are giving them the ability to do something that is going to destroy their capacity to actually live their best life and is basically going to enslave them to that vice and to that addiction. I mean, another thing, right, is sex work, right, as it's euphemistically called, prostitution. Is someone more free if they're in a position when they're selling their body? I mean, I guess like what, a maximally free market that has slavery, right? That's part of a free market. A free market means that you can sell your kids. Yeah, I would think surely disagree, but obviously not strongly disagree. Well, I don't know. See, again, this is a situation where I almost want to say I agree, because I would say that the ability of people to exchange goods and services, for me to say, well, I have this and you have that, and I want what you have and you want what I have, so let's trade it. That is actually a really good thing, and it does give us a lot of freedom. So in that sense, I would say yes. I'm just aware of, I think I will say agree. I'll say agree, because I think the areas where I'm disagreeing, they're quite niche, right? Like, I think most people aren't really thinking about that. So yeah, I think it would be like that. That's going to stop me from strongly agreeing, because I do think there are cases where, basically people having more freedom to buy and sell certain things actually leads to degeneracy, which takes away from people's freedom, because I think freedom is in some way rooted in being a virtuous, rational person. But yeah, I will say I agree, because absolutely I do think that right now, for example, I'm probably not going to do like the proper Patreon shout out. Maybe I'll do it the way I do, but usually I plan these out in advance, and I just came up off the top of my head. You have the freedom to give on my Patreon. And that gives me, then I have the freedom to say, well, based on the fact that I now have this money that allows me to dedicate time to doing this channel, everything works out, everyone wins, and that is a good free exchange, which we stan. It is a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled branded consumer product. Strongly agree. Specifically, I mean, it's not just the fact you're selling it, it's the fact that it is bottled and branded. I'm against consumerism. I've said that before. I think it's evil. I think branding as a concept it's really dumb to me that people talk about like, we've got some money now, we can buy name brands. It's like, who gives a crap? Like, buy quality. Absolutely. If you like the taste of Coke over, like, I've often found that supermarket Coca-Cola is much less enjoyable than Coke brand Coca-Cola. So yeah, in that case, that's nicer. And there are situations where I have said, off-brand so-and-so isn't as nice. But the idea, like, there are literally some people who it almost seems like they think that buying a branded version of something makes it better. Honestly, I'm always embarrassed when I wear, like, I've actually ended up getting as presents, or I don't know, maybe from like charity shops and stuff, where I've just like liked the design of it, designer branded stuff. And I feel incredibly embarrassed to wear it, because I feel like I'm literally wearing a big sign saying, I'm a giant moron who got ripped off. Right? That's what, if you're walking around with a big fat red Supreme logo, that's what you're wearing as far as I'm concerned. You're literally wearing a all I see is I'm a giant moron who got ripped off. Especially unless you look like so rich that then maybe I'll say, oh, I'm so rich I literally don't care about anything. Which, fine. But yeah, it's just very weird to me. All right. Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. I can tell you right now, I'm feeling a strong agree. Well, no, sorry, not a strong agree. I'm feeling just an agree, but I'm feeling an agree very strongly. Because generally speaking, I would say, especially in the UK where land is incredibly limited, I think there needs to be a lot of regulation around like who owns what land. And yeah, I just feel like it's something that based on that should be held in common and that it should basically be designated to people. Having said that, the reason why I'm not going to say strongly agree is because, I don't know, like I feel like ultimately someone should have the security of knowing, like once they have bought the house, that they own the house. So I feel like actually, I don't know, yeah, I guess in some sense I do think people should own the land on which they live. But this is a tough one actually, yeah, because I think that actually you should own, but the problem is I actually think that most people should live in something approximating high rises, like not quite that extreme, but basically I don't think that people should have these kind of suburban houses where they own a lot of land. I think people should own, it's a tough, because obviously, like, you know, I think people should own some land. I just don't think there should be this whole industry around like buying up land and stuff like that. So I'm actually now torn between agree and disagree, because I'm kind of like, well, yeah, like people should sometimes own land or portions of land, or, you know, like hold land in common, but maybe that's because they've bought it. I guess I would say the land itself, I'll say agree, just because in my head, I don't really think it's the land itself that is being bought or sold. I think the land is something held in common. It's just that obviously the land kind of at times comes with whatever's built on top of it. And to me, that's like the important thing. So technically, I do think people should be able to buy and sell land, but that is in having actually done something on it. And what they're really selling there is the improvements they've made to the land. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. Now, this is a really weird one to me, because I would actually say that the people who are doing the manipulating of the money are the people who work in the financial sector. And they actually are contributing something to society, because they are making decisions about who to invest in and things like that. I would say that actually the people who manipulate money, like the real issue are the people who own capital, right? Because they're not doing anything at all. The people who are manipulating money, at least they're doing something. But the person who just like owns a whole load of money and just gives it to like an investment firm, and they do all of the work of actually deciding how that money should be invested, the real villain there is the person who owns the capital, who just relies on other people's work to increase the value of that capital. So this is a difficult one because of the way it's worded. Because I don't agree. Like, I do think there is a massive class of people who get incredibly wealthy. In fact, yeah, the majority of like personal fortunes, if we're using that word to imply something big, are made by people who don't actually contribute anything. They're just parasites who own stuff and use their ownership of stuff that they probably didn't work for, they just inherited, to become incredibly rich. The problem is that's not what this says. This says people who manipulate money. And I don't think there is actually a massive problem of people manipulating money in order to like earn, because again, that is actually work. I'm going to assume, I guess I'm just going to have to say agree. If it said specifically people who own money and contribute nothing to society, or like own like capital. Yeah, if it said simply own capital and contribute nothing to their society, I would strongly agree. But it doesn't say it says manipulate money. And I do think there is value in the financial sector. And when I see manipulate money, I think, oh, you're talking about the financial sector, the people who are involved in moving money around, investing, stuff like that. And I think that actually is an important engine of economic growth. So I do think they're contributing something to society. Although I don't know, because at the same time, I guess I could say it's implying that they contribute nothing to their society. You know what, screw it. I'll just go strongly agree, because I think this is just like poorly worded, and I think the key thing is contribute nothing to their society. So we'll say strongly agree. Why not? Because I am very much against that No, actually, no, I should go back to agree, because I am technically a capitalist, even though I have criticisms of it. Technically I am a capitalist because I do support the system of capitalism. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. It's one of those things where I'm kind of like, there is like a bit of a get good attitude. Like, you shouldn't really need protectionism because you should be able to, basically only two situations, right? Either the thing you're trading for is something you literally can't do yourself, in which case, why would you put tariffs on that? Because, like, what? You're not protecting any internal industry by putting those tariffs on. Or it's something that you can produce yourself, in which case, why don't you just get better at producing it? The one thing I will say, I think that it is sometimes necessary. Essentially, I'm leading to sometimes necessary, because there are situations where other people, like other countries, may have incredibly low wages and you could be undercut. And yeah, I feel like in that context, you do need to have some defense against that. The issue is, I don't know, yeah, the problem with tariffs is obviously it does pass the expense on to consumers, and you could say in a way it all just works out. But my instinct is to say, I think there needs to be I think the state needs some degree of control over it. So I'm going to say yes, I think that actually you do need to protect some stuff. Next, the only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. So here's the complexity here. I do agree that that's all companies should try to do, and I don't like it when companies try to say that, like, oh, part of their mission is to do good for the world. Because it's like, well, that's not your goal. Like, the problem with them saying that is that implies that that is the job of the private sector, to make the world better for everyone. But I don't think that is the job of the private sector. I think that's the job of the public sector. I think the job of the public sector is to regulate the private sector for the benefit of everyone, because the job of the private sector is just to seek a maximizing of profit for shareholders. So in some sense, I'm like, oh, I would actually agree, because I would say, well, the only thing that companies should be doing is delivering a profit to their shareholders, but I would say that the government should be regulating those companies. However, I do think that actually, if we talk about responsibility, then even though it's not something I think the company should actively be doing, yeah, obviously they do need some sort of regulation to achieve that. So I think that is something we should be looking for companies to do, but not voluntarily. No, I don't think that's like something that we would expect companies to be doing voluntarily. So yeah, disagree. The rich are too highly taxed. Strongly disagree. I don't even think the poor are too highly taxed, so that's an easy one. Those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. This is an interesting one, right? Because the thing I would point out here is that if you have so I actually do have a quite sophisticated opinion. So basically, I think that if you have a child who is sick, it would be inhuman to suggest that you shouldn't put all of your own resources towards making that child as well as they can. What I would support, I think, is a rule which says you can pay for private healthcare, but there will be a massive tax on that, such that so let's say, for example, the cost of private healthcare for a child with cancer is £50,000. So it costs £50,000 to get the child this state-of-the-art treatment. I think that you should have to pay £150,000, because 2/3 of the cost, 100,000, should go towards cancer research. And that way, it's a case of, yes, obviously, if you, like, whatever you feel you are able to pay to make your child as well as they possibly can be, I completely understand that, and that makes sense. And I wouldn't, if there was someone who was incredibly rich, who had billions of pounds, and their child got sick, I would feel like it would be absolutely inhuman to say to that person, you are not allowed to pay for your child to get the best possible care. Or maybe, you know, like their wife or whatever. Or I mean, maybe the person's a woman, maybe their husband, or maybe they're lesbian or gay, whatever. Anyway. But at the same time, I also think, of course, what we want is a world where people's, like, the problem is it is likewise inhuman to say, well, presumably if you're saying that people need to spend this money to really give their child a fighting chance, then what you're implying is that the people who do not have this money to spend, that their child should just die, you know? Like, that's kind of always my weird attitude when people say, like, oh, you know, why shouldn't someone... And people always go for a child, and I think that makes sense, because obviously, you know, people tend to feel more sympathetic towards children. Whenever we talk about, like, should people have the right to pay for certain advantages, certain privileges, people say, well, how can you say someone doesn't have the right to pay for this for their child? Everyone should have the right to pay for this for their child. The problem is, of course, by talking about it as if it's such a serious thing, you are kind of running into the issue of, well, a lot of people don't have the ability to pay for this for their children. So that's why I would say, yes, if you have the ability to, you should have the right to, but you should also have to contribute a significant amount, certainly more than the base standard cost of the treatment itself, towards funding to make sure that, you know, there can be basically, you know, whether you want to call it like a research, like a charity research hospital or whatever, but basically some organization that's going to work to make sure that more children have access to this thing. Or maybe even just to pay for, like, you know, obviously you save, and I'm not saying this is exactly how it should work, but you save your one child to the tune of £50,000, but then two less privileged children whose parents don't have that money can also get that treatment for the same cost. That would be like how I think it makes sense to organize it. So I'll have to say mildly agree, right? I think people should have the ability, but of course I think that there should be an increased cost in order to ensure that by paying that money, they are funding the capacity of other people to do that for their children, or again, for themselves. But again, I think we're mostly talking about children, because who cares about regular people? Government should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Strongly agree. I mean, I guess it depends how they mislead them, but yeah, obviously, like, there's all sorts of, like, scams and stuff like that where the government have, where businesses have, like, lied about tests. They've got pharmaceuticals or food products put through in a way that's very manipulative. And absolutely, I think there should be consequences to that. Especially because, I mean, the real thing there is it's because the very nature of the fact you're trying to mislead means you're trying to get away with it. So I think for things that people are trying to get away with, there needs to be a sense of a punishment that says, don't even try to get away with this, because when you get caught, it will be worse for you. So I think it's always like trying to conceal your evil should almost always be considered worse than the evil itself. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. This is another one of those ones that's really weirdly worded, because someone might say, well, I don't support a free market. And the reason I don't support a free market is because a free market actually does not require restrictions on the ability. So you could like answer this one of two ways. You could say, actually, I'm a hardcore right-wing libertarian, so I support a free market, and therefore I don't think we should have restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. Or you could say, well, actually, I'm a hardcore leftist, and I'm totally against the free market, and the reason I'm against the free market is because a free market means not putting restrictions on the ability. So it's kind of a bit of a weird one, because it literally, like, you could be right or left and give the exact same answer here. So I don't really like this question at all, but I will say agree. Because I might actually say strongly agree. Because in my case, I actually do think that, again, it's an awkward situation, because again, I think you could say, well, no, I've got to say agree. It's the awkwardness of how the question is worded, because I don't actually think that putting restrictions on the ability of the predator multinationals makes it more of a free market. I guess I would say it makes it more of a genuine free market. My tummy just rumbled. Either way, yeah, I just, I feel like I'm going to wait, like I'm not doing strongly enough, I feel. Like, I've done quite a few stronglies. But yeah, I'm just going to say agree, because the wording is weird. I do think that we should have I think monopolies are bad. Whatever, okay. So I support the free market, and I think that monopolies are bad, so I guess the answer is agree. Right, now we're on to the social issues. So, abortion when a woman's life is not threatened should always be illegal. I'm going to put disagree. There's a reason why... Yes. There's a reason why I'm putting disagree and not strongly disagree. Because I think it's insane to me that there are some people who don't even understand the pro-life position. To me, the pro-life position seems incredibly reasonable. There is a genetically distinct human being in play here, And if you if you engage in an action which you know is going to end the life of that genetically distinct human being, you are murdering them. That to me is like a perfectly reasonable thing to say. I think, like, for me, the abortion debate is an issue where I am constantly like thinking, am I right on this? Because I would say I'm pro-choice, but I'm constantly like thinking, does that make sense? And as such, it is insane to me. Like, I remember there was like a controversy when I was a pro-life society at university, and basically there was like an effort to shut them down, to stop them having meetings and things like that. And I remember seeing it on Reddit, of course, and like all of the top comments were like, I can't even believe that there are people like this in this country. I can't even believe that a society like this would be allowed to exist. It's disgusting that there are even enough people to populate this university society with members. It's like, really? You can't believe that there are people who look at a genetically distinct human, and that is what we're talking about here. That is not moralistic language. That is purely scientifically factual language. There is a genetically distinct human being whose life is being taken away, who is being terminated. Their life is not, they're not alive anymore. They were alive, now they're not. And that is due to the action of some people who know that's what they're doing. They know they are ending the life of this genetically distinct human being. And you're saying you can't understand. And to me, the problem I have with that is sometimes it's kind of like a lady doth protest too much situation. When people are genuinely like that, like they're so firm in their like language, it's like, I just can't understand how anyone would think that. It makes me think that deep down they must believe that they're wrong, right? Because for me, I'm like, the fact that I'm like, oh, well, I think that pro-choice is the right position, but I think there's a huge debate around that. That shows me that I'm someone who's willing to consider the nuances of the issue, to consider the fact, this is what I believe, but maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. The fact that there are so many other people who seem literally incapable, like they refuse to do that, that suggests there's a lot of people out there who like basically think deep down that they might be on the wrong side. Because I don't understand why you would be so offended, so shocked, so unable to even consider the possibility of why someone would have a problem with abortion, unless you yourself deep down actually know why someone would have a problem with it. You think deep down it might be a legitimate concern, and that's why you absolutely refuse to talk about it. Because you know if you did have a conversation about it, you might come to a conclusion that what you think you've been supporting is wrong. So to me, those people who, like I say, just refuse to even understand and aren't able to understand your opposing position, not only do I think that's ridiculous, I think it betrays the possibility that actually deep down they are deeply insecure in their position. Now in my case, I would say that I'm not claiming to be secure in my position, and I definitely can understand why there are people who have issues with it. So yeah, absolutely, I'm not going to say strongly disagree there. Disagree, and who knows, maybe maybe it will be agree at some point, because again, like I say, it's an issue which is for me, I do think the violinist argument is a very strong argument though. So anyway, all authority should be questioned. Yeah, right. I mean, 1 Thessalonians 5. What does it say? Question every spirit, hold fast to that which is good. Basically, you should. Yes, basically what it says, right? Isn't it? Yeah, just do that which is right, and not that which is wrong. Do that which is true, or believe that which is true, not that which is false. It doesn't matter which authority is telling you it. Yeah, absolutely. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I think this one's like very difficult because no, basically, I would say that for me, a rehabilitation and containment can also be very important. And the idea that every single punishment should be some exact poetic, obviously I wouldn't really say like that, because there are some punishments where you literally can't like reverse them on the person because, maybe the person's into that or whatever. Like, for example, like a drug dealer, for example, you can't say, oh, you're selling drugs? Well, in that case, we're going to sell some drugs to you. Okay, well, there's a reasonable possibility that a drug dealer is themselves like into drugs. So you're not really punishing them then. So there are some situations where the other person, so like that's just an area where it fails like logically to say an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But yeah, obviously also there's the immorality. I think it's always immoral to murder someone who doesn't present a direct threat to somebody else's life. So even if someone has like killed someone, certainly as the state, I don't think you should, when you've gotten in a position where they're completely pacified, then like strap them down and end their life by injecting them with deadly chemicals. So yeah, I guess I'm going to say strongly disagree, even though I'm not like, I'm not like some prison abolitionist or anything, but I think I disagree with it strongly enough that I can put a strongly disagree. And for example, I mean, like, if people talk about like, oh, pedophiles, we should shoot them and all that. My attitude towards them is like, it's more a matter of containment. Like, I think if someone has that, then they are so messed up in the head that I don't really see them ever, being a functional good member of society. So I wouldn't like talk about rehabilitation, but I would also say there's almost like, to me, there's no point punishing it, because it's kind of like, what are you even punishing? Like, that person is so messed up in the head. Probably about like a huge number of those people were victims of abuse themselves. So basically, you're not like, it's almost like you're not punishing evil, right? Because you're just punishing something like that person is wired so differently that you can't even, from my perspective, look at it in those terms of like punishment. Like, yeah, sure. If someone who's like otherwise like kind of a decent normal person does something evil, you might want to punish them by just saying, oh, we're just gonna like put that back on you, how do you like it? But when you're dealing with people who are like deeply sick and twisted, I almost feel like the whole thing of like punishment goes out the window, because I don't even like, you're assuming, in order to like talk about punishing those people, you're assuming that you have an understanding of their theory of mind such that you can even know what it would mean to punish them. And I don't. Like, if someone's like a pedophile, that's so just completely incomprehensible to me that someone would have that mentality, that someone would have that desire, that I wouldn't even know how to punish them, because I don't even know what like that is. Like, what's like, I just don't understand their brain at all. So like, my attitude would just be essentially get rid of them, segregate them from society, just put them in like a, maximum security prison filled with all the other nonsense, and just kind of leave them to it, because like, obviously I don't think they should, I don't think that they could be let back into society. So that would be an example where, I don't know, is that like a more extreme position, less extreme position? I'm not sure, but essentially I'm not really that interested in punishment a lot of the time, so much as I'm just interested in how do you deal with the reality of these like evil people in the world. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theatres or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. Strongly disagree. I'm a big fan of the BBC. I think that when you look at these kind of profit-driven movies, so much of them are just such drivel, such crap. They're so awful. I think there needs to be a government and a public effort to encourage media that elevates the soul, that achieves certain things for society. I think that social engineering is often a good thing, and part of that, and I mean, also you just look at something like the rise of the like AI slop videos for kids. That is incredibly, like, the free market says that's very cheap to make. It's entertaining, like you can just make it like complete like flashing lights and colors and shapes and things like that, and that will entertain the kids. But it's of no actual value whatsoever. So I would be quite comfortable taking that as a just undeniable example of when I just thought, if Audacity stops recording, I'm in a lot of trouble. But basically, just to me, that's an undeniable example of where it's important that we actually have a way of bypassing a pure profit motive when it comes to art in society. Anyway, everyone, if this is radically if maybe this section took way longer than the next section, we are halfway through now, then I will cut this differently. This has probably ended up being a longer video, even though it is just part one, because obviously, I've been recording for slightly less time than I usually would be recording, but that's because usually I am like reading a script, I'm like kind of taking it in, I'm like making sure I deliver the lines in a way which I think sounds good or whatever. Here I've, been rambling a bit more. It makes sense that it would have been longer. But yeah, we'll end it here. So I'll just say thank you everyone for watching. Patreon, all of that. Maybe I'll be able to show you a clip. Just if their clip appears, it means I was able to show you a clip.
I would ask you, when you see somebody who tells you something about who they are and it conflicts with your initial impression, do you believe that you are a better judge, or why would you believe that you're a better judge of their identity than they are when they give you that information?
So that's an interesting question, and the answer that I always give to it is I'm actually not claiming to know necessarily much about the person that I'm talking to. I think that's kind of the wrong way of framing it. I would say that we know about the concepts, right? When I say a biological male isn't a woman, that's not really me saying that I know some huge, deep amount about this particular individual. I'm saying that I know something about the categories involved, the category of being a biological male, the category of being a woman, and how those two things preclude each other. So if you're able to give on Patreon, that is really appreciated. And you can maybe see my other content. Again, I'm recording this enough in advance. I don't really know what's going to be going on with my life right now. But yeah, hopefully it's something to do with me moving into a new house. So get excited for that. And I'll see you all for part 2. Bye.